Bună dimineața tuturor! Vă mulțumim că participați la o nouă ediție a webinarilor EY. Tema din această dimineață este supply chain și cum anume trebuie să ne protejăm de toate aceste evenimente disruptive din ultima perioadă. Avem ca și invitații atât ex-specialiști din interiorul rețelei EY și aici mă refer la EY Grecia în particular, cât avem și un invitat extern EY, pe Dragoș Gavilescu, founder și CEO Design Thinking Society. Cu voia noastră o să trec în engleză, o să încep să vorbesc în engleză pentru că colegii din Grecia încă nu au învățat suficient de bine românește. So, hi everyone. As I mentioned, I switched to English. I've switched to English. Sorry. So today's theme is adjusting supply chains to unexpected disruptions. Obviously, the most recent disruption is the COVID-19. So we will be touching not just what happened, but how to protect the business and also increase the resilience for the next phase, which is probably the next 3 to 4 months, but also the beyond. So setting the infrastructure from a supply chain perspective in particular on the right ground to have a sustainable business moving forward in the case of various scenarios. Few admin topics. The session today is going to be 1 hour and a half. We're going to take questions throughout the session, but also towards the end. The idea is to respond as much as possible within the allotted 1 hour and 15 minutes, and then have another 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. You can use the panel on your right, which is mentioned Q&A. I hope you can all see it. And if you write down there the questions, we'll try to answer them as fast as possible. The session is recorded. We're going to publish it on our website along with the Q&A, along with your questions and our answers in the coming days. So more than happy to accommodate as many questions as you can. That's about it. Maybe let's get quickly through the who's presenting today. So if I could move to the next slide. So I'm Cristian Cristoriu. I'm a partner within EY Romania, leading the digital transformation, and also being the leader for the consumer products and retail for the advisory business, for the consulting business. Together with me, but in another office in Greece, we have Thanos Mavros. Thanos.
Thank you, Christy. Good morning to all. I'm Thanos Mavros, partner at EY. I'm an industrial engineer holding a master's degree from NYU. I have more than 30 years of working experience, of consulting experience. I lead supply chain and operations at Central and Southeastern Europe, responsible for the development of our capabilities, teams, and services. I'm happy to be part of this morning webcast. Vasilis?
Good morning to everyone also from me. I'm Vasilis Papakostas. So I'm a senior manager in the supply chain team of EY for the South Cluster of CESA region. I'm very happy to be with you, and we'll be talking through the challenges and opportunities that appear in the supply chain spectrum throughout this period.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Mircea Giurcan. I'm also a senior manager with EY, been with the firm for the past 10 years. And in the meanwhile, I have been part of quite a few transformational programs across Romania, Europe, Middle East, the US as well, while covering aspects of oil and gas, energy, but not least but not last, a lot of retail as well. So that's about me. Dragoș?
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you, EY, for the invitation. Privileged to be with everyone here. And I'm running a boutique firm called Design Thinking Society. that deals with how can you solve complex and wicked problems of today. And I'll talk about that later on. My experience is in market research, FMCG, and then I did some international consulting. And since, for the past 4 years about, I've only done, focused my entire attention to design thinking as a method to solve problems in a creative way. Thank you, guys, and happy to be here with everyone. Over to you.
Impact of the coronavirus. We're looking at a major impact across all the economies. So the coronavirus has not just impacted one particular region, has had I would say, a devastating impact pretty much across the globe. We see right now a significant increase in the numbers of both infected but also death in LATAM. Which poses, again, a serious risk to the U.S. Due to the economic ties to the North America this time as well, on top of what they are experiencing. I was reading recently also an article from Financial Times, which are mentioning that the global debt levels are at the highest since the World War II. So we're looking right now, for example, from a developed economies perspective of roughly an average of 120% of GDP. For the emerging, we're looking at roughly about 67, 68. Some of the countries which were also severely hit by the coronavirus, like for example Italy, there are various forecasts that put the global impact from a global debt perspective to 150%, right? So all these have a significant impact on their capabilities to borrow. And if we look then under the hood, right, it will hit all the companies, all the organizations, right, be it large or small or medium-sized that do business. And supply chain, in particular, the trade has been severely disrupted initially by closing of China, right? So manufacturing, production facilities as well, but also due to the fact that the borders have been closed, right? So there are quite a lot of controls. Quite a few people, quite a few repeated analysts do expect an increase in the nationalist, let's say, manufacturing feelings, right? So a lot of them do mention the fact that Europe or America, for that matter, do need to reduce their reliance on China, in particular from as I mentioned, right, from production facilities. So we might expect in the coming years some relocation of the production facilities to countries like Romania as well, right? But that remains to be seen also around the politics. All in all, it's a crisis that has disrupted big time, right? Most of the companies were not expecting this, right? So as we will see later on, the business continuity plan, while they were put in place, not one of them have actually taken into consideration a pandemic impact. Now we're here, right? And most of the countries have actually emerged from the lockdowns. Romania as well, right? So as we've seen, there are new relaxation rules that will come in place in the coming weeks. Now, what is to be expected, right? So there are quite a few outcomes discussed, right? The V-shaped recovery, the U-shaped recovery, the L-shaped recovery, the kind of lazy worm type of recovery, right? Whereby the economy has dropped and then we see up and downs for a longer period. Nobody really knows. What we can see is that there is a bit of a consensus that it's not going to be a V-shaped recovery. Although the U.S. markets have rallied in the past, I would say, weeks, that they almost reached the peaks of the pre-COVID, right? So the February peaks. We can see right now that there is going to be a correction, and I would say in the past 2 to 3 days, sorry, the market has significantly dropped, right? So if I look at the Nasdaq index, it's dropped from 27,000 points to 25,000 points. So a sharp, right, 8 to 9% reduction that is expected to be done, right? What does this mean? It means that more or less the companies will have to prepare for the new normal, whatever that new normal is. We're not very clear, right? Nobody, again, as I mentioned, nobody really knows. We don't have a crystal ball. However, some of these new normal guidelines are here around disrupted supply chain, around the need to cut costs, so in order to optimize the processes, around the increase of cyber attacks, and in particular, I would say not just the typical work from home attacks, right, on personal computers that we're more or less familiar with, but also a significant increase in the operational technology attacks, right, particularly on the critical infrastructure. I would say we will also see, or the guidelines are also towards increasing the technology usage, and all of these aspects are going to be covered in today's presentation, right, by myself or my various colleagues. With that in mind, I'd like to invite you to the first poll, which is around how long do you estimate that the crisis will last? And I mean moving from June, where we're right now, onwards, right? So you've got 5 options. You can use the poll function. I hope you can all see it, and we will publish then the results. We will see the results on the right side of the screen. You have around 60 seconds to answer. We have one question, and the second question is going to be around what is your most likely outcome estimates on the impact, right? So as you can see, most of the impact forecast is a decrease. However, we've seen also industries where the revenue has increased due to the pandemic. So if you could, thank you, Ilya. If you could then vote on hopefully all of you can see the polling to your right. If you can't see, just please submit a question and we'll try to guide you as much as possible. Okay, so what we see is that quite a few of you have actually answered that it's going to be an impact for the coming 9 months to 1 year. Some of you have also answered that the crisis is going to be more than 1 year. I would say, and interesting, there is an optimistic perspective as well, saying that the crisis will be just for let's say, the coming 6 months. I would say most of the estimates around the crisis, or at least the revised estimates, both from an IMF perspective, the World Bank, but also the European Commission, is that the crisis will have significant impact also on 2021. I think that even yesterday or on Friday, Noria Rubini was kind of mentioning his forecast, and there was that forecast had a profound negative outlook, right? Meaning that even in 2021, at least from an American perspective, the economy is not going to be to the level of 2019 levels. I think it's interesting to see the perspective on Romania as well. I would like right now to give the floor to Thanos to take us through the impact on the operations. Thanos?
Thank you, Christine. Nowadays, focus is shifting from protecting and continuing our operations within factories, distribution centers, fulfillment centers, and retail stores to identifying the new status quo and adjusting our supply chain operations into it. Corporates till now try to safeguard businesses and stay in operation, and in many cases, that was not an easy job. With the market restart, companies try to fix supply chain, to restart production, to operate retail stores and malls, to reach out to customers, while at the same time trying to increase resilience by increasing the workforce flexibility, managing digital channels, finding ways to receive raw, intermediate materials and packaging materials, and by refreshing policies to cover the pandemic. But what is highly important is the beyond phase. And beyond for us at Ernst & Young and supply chain team means being able to create long-term value by reframing and transforming businesses, and this leads to redefine supply chain purpose, seize new growth opportunities, reimagine relationships with both suppliers and customers, transform virtual working, reinvent business solutions, explore different go-to-market channels while leveraging full digital experience to customers. And we will see later on, Vasilis will present in a while the new customer personas that EY Future Consumer Survey has detected that ran during the pandemic. And we call the beyond phase as the new normal, and Christy has already mentioned about the new normal. During this turbulent and challenging period, we have supported leading corporates to build their enterprise resilience framework. This started from establishing a crisis management office directly reported to steering committees and top management and CEOs, and that worked around three main pillars. The first stream dealt with customers and clients. It handled regulatory matters and maintained investor relations. The second stream dealt with overall business continuity handling, liquidity, cybersecurity, and overall people management and leadership. The supply chain and business operations stream, which is important, handled sourcing and distribution, both for primary transport as well as secondary distribution, the health of people within factories, distribution centers, and retail stores, as well as with the facilities management, making sure for a healthy and COVID-free environment. This framework supported by a robust project management office. Let us see what companies did over the past weeks and months and what they are about to do over the next. The first phase, we call it the now, and it was a phase that you all tried your best to keep operations running. The second phase that we live nowadays, we call it the next, or at least as EY we called it the next, and we all try to work better. And we all try to work better by implementing intervention that enable productive and engaging work experience while maximizing safety, collaboration, and performance post-lockdown. And what is important for corporates and for all of us is the beyond phase. where we need to think and work differently and make the new resilient supply chain as our new norm. And we will present in more detail how do we believe that the supply chain of the future should look like. I would like to welcome you to the third poll question. And I have seen from the previous polls that half of you have participated where the other half did not. So I will pay a bit of attention, and I will like to welcome you all to participate as we plan to share all of the results, not only just the slides of today's webcast, but all of the results, and maybe the results at a later stage mean something to all of you, to all of us. As supply chain leaders, did you work with their counterparts in legal to understand the financial implications of not being able to deliver supply to customers? Do you work with human resources to understand people capacity, impact, and get guidance to employees located in the impact areas? If you respond to number 3, technology, do you work with technology people to enable automation and a remote way of working? Did you do all of the above? None of the above? Please respond as you believe. Please take a moment and respond. You can see from the right-hand side of the slide. So please take a moment, and I welcome all of you to respond. Did you or do you work as supply chain and logistics leaders with your counterparts, with legal, human resources, technology, all of the above, none of the above? And let's allow some more time.
Sorry, Thanos, sorry, I think there might be a slight technical issue. I can see that the poll has ended, at least this is what I see. So maybe I'll ask...
I'm really sorry for that.
Okay, now it's...
Yeah. Majority of you have responded again with no answer. I don't know if you are facing some of the problems, technical problems, or not willing to participate, but for the rest, and thank you very much for the rest that you have participated, yes, you have worked and you have collaborated with all of the counterparts, both legal, human resources, technology, and that is actually very rational for supply chain and logistics leaders as supply chain processes run horizontally, the business processes. And if I can go ahead and discuss about the critical part within supply chain, which is the third-party resilience. At all supply chains, we know how important is third-party resilience. And there are some key challenges that are related to this, and more specifically, to the third-party operational resilience. And there were cases around the markets, not only for Romanian markets, but around the markets, that third parties stretched to fulfill, for instance, e-commerce orders. And in some cases, deliveries have exceeded 3 to 4 weeks. In some other cases, products never appeared, never arrived at houses. A second important part is the data security. And there were also cases that we have experiences, corporates have experiences, data leakages, when third-party personnel need to work remotely. And that was a disastrous time. And finally, to the third-party financial resilience, where there were cases that even good suppliers were not able to meet operational SLAs at all due to financial challenges, as many of their customer clients collapsed, and that had a direct impact on them and finally on us. And if we proceed trying to correlate third-party resilience with the now, next, beyond concept, that means that corporates tried to manage immediate operational resilience challenges, and they try to prioritize third parties and leverage the risk management framework that they have set in place. They understand how third parties, or try to understand how third parties were responding to COVID-19 and how they are preparing for a gradual reopening of their operations. And they also try to evaluate possible impact and monitor remediation actions. What is happening now at the next is they monitor mostly the financial stability of their critical and important third parties with an early warning screening system, a troubled third-party risk assessment, and a distressed third-party management concept. And again, what is important is the beyond phase, after the crisis phase, and this is to learn from COVID-19 challenges and enhance your third-party risk management models to future-proof all third-party operations. And this is important to understand how technology can help, how collaboration for both internal between functions and divisions, but also externals across industry. And I would like to welcome you, and hopefully with no technical challenges at this stage, a final, at least from my part, question related to third-party resilience. And it's a simple 1, 2, 3 selections that you can select. Is there a process at the moment to assess third-party resilience within your company? And please reply yes. We have a third-party risk management procedure focusing on all aspects: financial stability, operation, and cyber resilience. COVID-19 response is also included and assessed. Yes, we have a third-party risk management procedure focusing on some aspects, for instance, financial or operational stability. No, there is not a solid approach on measuring risk raised by third parties. Please take a moment to respond. And I'm welcoming all of you, and hopefully we're not going to have any challenge at the moment to see the results. As I mentioned, besides the slideshow of today's webcast, we will be also include our responses to the main questions that you will raise, and also we will also share the results of the poll questions. So I'm welcoming all of you to participate. Let's allow some more time for the rest of our participants to respond. Is there a process to assess third-party resilience? Yes. And there is a second yes, but it's only focusing on some aspects, and there is a no question and no reply that there is not a solid approach on measuring risk raised by third parties. Let us allow some time to see and visit the results.
Maybe, Thanos, would you be able to share a couple of insights while we wait for the audience to?
Yes. Usually, what we have seen, not only from the Greek market, but the markets around, as we call it at EY, CESA, which is from the Baltics to Malta and from Poland to Russia Federation, is that usually there is the majority of supply chain logistics leaders are responding that they do have a third-party risk management procedure, unfortunately focusing on some aspects. For instance, some of the operational and a little bit on financial stability. Usually the cyber risk and the cyber resilient risk, and definitely in most cases, pandemic like COVID-19 stability was not a part of the third-party risk management. So yes, there is a risk, however, there is a part of it. So this is the insight that I would like to share. Can we see, please, the results? So that we can comment also not only from other markets. Again, yes, we have a third party focusing on some aspects is the majority of our responses, almost half of it. A solid third-party risk management to cover all aspects. A part of it, approximately 30%, one-third of you. No, there is not a solid approach on measuring risk raised by third parties. One-fourth of you, approximately 24%. And again, some of you have not responded. At this time, I would like to pass the floor and the webcast discussion to Christy, and I will be talking to you later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danos, for the insight shared. I will right now focus a bit on the cyber resilience and the business continuity, and just present you a bit of the Maslow pyramid when it comes to business continuity management system. So what we see and what we've seen, and for the right reasons, obviously, is that the initial response to the pandemic was around protecting our employees, right? So the health and safety regulations put in place, both in terms of the work from home, right? So stopping the people to come from work with all the procedures that follow that, right? In terms of the IT, providing the IT infrastructure, so laptops, providing the right applications to work from home, granting the rights. But also moving to let's say the more operational things, right, around fitting up the offices with various disinfectants and things like that. And I think from that perspective, right, most of the companies have fared quite well, right? So I would say that if I look at the numbers of infected persons in Romania, right, we're much lower than the average if we prorate it to the number of the population, right, to the size of the population. So if we move this, right, from a business continuity perspective, right, most of the companies have been able to do a threat and risk assessment quite fast. So they put in place, so they've identified those measures that have to be taken, right? But from that perspective, right, from the operational thing, there was a gap between the operational things that were done and the actual business continuity. So we've seen, unfortunately, quite a lot of the companies putting those measures in place, right, the health and safety regulations, but paying a bit of a less attention to the actual business continuity per se. And this is where we would like to stress, right? So if we look down the slide, right? So if we look at the message on the slide, there is a value chain over there, which says once we've done the assessment, both in terms of the threat and the risks as well posed, we need to very quickly move to a business impact analysis, right? So what does it mean, such measures that for example, we've put into place for our businesses? So obviously, what we see is that the initial assessment was that there is going to be an increase in the cost for all these measures to be right. So less, for example, less space to be used by the employees, more cost allotted to the disinfectants, probably a bit more cost from an IT perspective due to the increase in numbers of VPN laptops and things like that. So there is a business impact. From that perspective, we need to think a bit slightly larger, right? A bit more strategic when it comes to the overall framework, right? So the overall framework business continuity means that there has to be certain organizations that have to be put in place, right, to measure and to protect the business. Then there has to be budgets in place. There has to be certain processes. You know, all the let's say typical areas, typical dimensions that go into a framework. We will definitely be faced with certain shortages. So some of the, let's say, scenarios that we've put in place might no longer be viable. So if I take an example, for example, right, we will look at third-party resilience. Some of our critical suppliers might not be able to sustain, for example, our demand. Some of the suppliers might not even be able to open their shops. Transportation is blocked. So there are a number of alternative recovery strategies that we have to identify and test them for resilience. From there, we need to have clear plans put in place, right? So actions put in place, step by step, right? So a bit of a micromanagement, if you'd like, and with the people allotted to them, right? So then, because we will have people acting on those plans, right? We need to make sure that these people are trained. There is an awareness from the top management down to the middle management, and then to the overall employees. What we need to do, why are we doing it? What do we need to do, and how are we going to do it? And finally, for those businesses that are let's say more mature, right? There has to be also certain simulations and tests that we need to put in place to make sure that, one, the business plans are working, the business continuity plans are working, but also the alternative strategies, and to be able to kind of change fast the course when if we see critical blocks within the business plan not being able to cope with the situation. So all in all, right, there is a fundamental let's say value chain that has to be put in place in order to achieve that operational resilience. If I move right now to the next slide, right, which is around the way the Romanian companies have actually tested or have actually let's say planned for and also tested their business continuity plan. I'd like to invite you to the fifth poll question. As mentioned by Thanos, feel free to answer, right? We actually encourage you to answer to these questions, just to make sure that the relevancy of the insights it's getting back to you. So we have four options, right? To the question, have you tested your business continuity plan? Option number one is yes, we've tested it, including provisions with respect to pandemic outbreak. The second option is yes, we've tested it, but without a provision with respect to pandemic outbreak. The third one is that no, we haven't tested our business continuity plan. And the fourth one, we actually don't have a business continuity plan. So please take a minute to answer to the poll. Maybe Thanos, in the meantime, Thanos Vasilis, if you could share insights from the wider Central Eastern European and the Russian Federation experience.
Yeah, I will share my experience in this specific, the business continuity plan. It's a market centric logic. In some of the markets, majority of corporates, they reply yes without provisions with respect to pandemic outbreak. And it is unfortunate. This is at all major markets like Russia, like Poland, Romania, Turkey, Greece. And it is unfortunate that smaller markets, I will not mention, but you understand, within the Central and Southeastern European markets, there were an enormous number of corporates that they do not have a documented and well-structured business continuity plan. There are plans around, but not a well-documented business continuity plan. I don't know if Christy has, Vasilis, if you would like to comment on that, if you have another view?
We have been feeling that we would not face such a crisis. We had too much reliance on an existing supply chains, and we had a major disruption beyond the ability to forecast, which has shown that we're very dependent on external forces, and we need to rethink. And this is a major challenge for all the components going forward now.
If I can add, Christy, to what Vasilis mentions, is that there is most of companies have a tier 1 assessment for third parties. However, what about tier 2 and tier 3? Because if the suppliers of our supplier, then suppliers of the supplier of our supplier collapse, then it creates a difficult challenge throughout the value chain and throughout the supply chain. So the pandemic and COVID-19 showed all of us that it's not only tier 1 that we have to look, but we have to look more in depth along the supply chain.
Absolutely, and I think to that. Thank you very much, Thomas. I was going to allude to that as well, right? And this is what most of the, let's say, programs around the small and medium enterprises. For example, in Romania, we have a national program called IMM Invest, Întreprinderile Mici și Mijlocii Invest, right? Which is essentially crediting with a state-backed credit for those companies that have been hit by the pandemic. And these are more or less, right, or they should be the backbone of any industries. So the role of such programs across the Western Europe, but also the other Europeans, but the other regions in Europe, was actually to more or less minimize this knockout effect, right, from those big companies that had enough cash flow and could sustain a crisis for a larger period, to those smaller companies who didn't have, for example, cash flow, right? Was one of the studies back in April was mentioning that if you look at the small and medium enterprises, at least in Romania, right, most of them had cash for about 3 weeks to survive, 2 to 3 weeks to survive, which is a significant, obviously, hit to those companies. If we look right now at the 2 months plus even of business that was stopped. So thank you very much to all of those who answered, and the result is more or less expected, and it's very much in line with what also Thanos and Vasilis mentioned, right, from other companies, right? So the big companies at least had a business continuity plan put in place, right? But there was no contingency from a pandemic outbreak perspective. And probably the tier 2 and the tier 3, they because the lack of cash flow, right? So because of the kind of smaller business, they didn't really take into consideration. But I think moving forward, all of us understood the importance of a business continuity plan. If I move to the next slide, which is around cyber resilience, and I was mentioning initially, right, that because of the work from home policies and people literally switching to more or less virtual private network, like the VPNs, and a lot of these applications that you typically access from the office, so within a private network, right now you have to access from home. There was a significant surge in the number of attacks. And if I'm allowed to give some numbers, you could, I don't know, there's one organization in particular that it's called RIUC, right, which is an organized crime organization, which managed to launch cyber attacks on computers, companies' computers, using ransomware, right? So essentially, ransomware is a type of attack whereby the virus encrypts files on the computers, random files, more or less all the files that it can infect. And then in order for the user to get access to those files, you have to pay a particular amount, right? Typically in cryptocurrency, so that it's untraceable. And this organization, for example, managed to get hold of over $250 million right how much of this money were actually being paid. With that we don't know because that's confidential information. But you can imagine the amount of computers that was infected just by one organization. Another particular interesting thing, right, was the number of domains that was registered, right? So the hackers have used a lot of the COVID-19, COVID-19, and all of these keywords around that were generating fear. So a lot of these websites were set up and were used to also launch cyber attacks, but also distribute malware. So we've seen back in April quite a lot of the applications, for example, on Google, but not being put on Google Store, but being directed, for example, on from Google Store or from App Store for that matter as well, that were mentioning download this app in order to be able to see who's infected around you. So that, right, it was creating this kind of false hope of being able to understand whom to avoid and whom not to avoid. Just again, right, very interesting, let's say, insights. Just in the last 5-6 days, right, there are over 460 malware specimens distributing false VPNs, false executables, mobile apps that were found. And this, you can imagine the amount of money that is being poured in cyber attacks. Now, if we move from the typical cyber attacks on personal computers, what we've seen is a huge resurgence on the operational infrastructure, right? Particularly if I look here at the critical infrastructure, meaning power and utilities lines, transformers, for example, or the oil and gas pipes, or the telecom infrastructure, or even the bank infrastructure, the payment infrastructure. What we see is that a lot of these attacks have actually been targeted, or much higher percentage of these attacks have been targeted on the critical infrastructure. And that's a very important aspect, right? Because at the European level, we also have the NIST directive, and in fact, for those attacks that have not been properly documented, right? So there is no threat response, but also the data has not been particularly immediately identified, right? The actual fine instituted by the European Commission is 5% of the revenue. So it's even higher than the GDPR fine that was put in place, right? And that sent shivers to all the companies, which was capped to 4% of the revenue, right? So we're talking about very important aspects. So most of the companies will have to look at their entire supply chain and understand where is the vulnerable point and then protect those, right? Whether you're actually depending on, as Thanos mentioned before, right? Whether if you are depending on a critical supplier or actor within the supply chain, if that actor gets hit by a fine or by a cyber attack, then your operations are disrupted as well, right? So we have to juggle between these, right? We have to maintain a big balance, a good balance. My last poll is around the operational security events, right? So the question is quite simple. Do you monitor the operational technology security events? And you can answer with yes, partially, only for the third parties, or just for your own. And the third option is obviously no. So I would like all of you as much as possible to answer. As per the previous experience, I would like to invite both Vasilis and Thanos to comment on the kind of a survey, similar surveys done in the wider Central Eastern European Russia region.
IT security has been an issue that is a hot topic for many years now, and it takes various aspects. We believe that as technology will become even more critical in the years to come across the supply chain, because all solutions that are coming depend on different types of technologies. It will become even more important. It's not just the cyber threat aspect that you described, Griffith. also how we have an internal process within the facilities. We have had cases with our clients recently where we had a case of cybersecurity that was not caused by a network attack. It was caused by a memory stick that was used to extract information on a regular basis from the systems. And that memory stick was also used by one of the users to a personal PC. And from that, you got an infection on a major production line system that disrupted operations for more than a week. So it's not just the technology aspect, the cyber, it's also how you protect the process and the equipment on a daily, regular basis with more similar threats and issues as well.
Vasilis has mentioned is quite crucial, because within disease and within factories, people and officials are a bit somehow, they think that they are somehow protected within the four walls that are not a part of the large ecosystem. But for instance, with this incident that created a major problem for a large machinery, proved that no one is protected, and operation technology security events can happen any place, and you don't have just to be on e-commerce business to take care of that.
Thank you, Thomas, for mentioning this. Absolutely, and we see it also in Romania. So as just coming back to the polls, we've got the results right now. Most of the let's say the respondents have actually so half of the respondents are actually monitoring the operational technology events. Right, some of the respondents might actually not have a particular high operational technology exposure. That's also important to mention. But quite an interesting part, right? So I would say a quarter of the respondents are actually not monitoring those security events, and this is critical because most of the companies, for example, that my colleagues that manage the cyber team, they were talking to people and they weren't realizing that there are certain assets which are exposed on the internet, which are actually under the threat of becoming, for example, hacked. Right. So these are very important things, right, in order to understand the exposure that you have, to assess the threat. What happens if those, for example, endpoints, if those devices are being hacked, and then what you can do in order to salvage whatever it's possible. I'd like to also encourage the participants to ask questions. So you can also ask questions, right? I know we've got a number of polls throughout the webcast, the webinar, but please feel free to ask your own questions. As mentioned, right, we'll be more than happy to answer them throughout, but also at the end. Now we kind of finished, right, a bit of theoretical aspects, but also going into practical aspects from cybersecurity, but also transportation. So I would like to invite Vasilis at this point in time to show us how the enterprises are becoming more resilient for the next and beyond phase. Vasilis?
Right now we're starting to enter the next phase. All of us have managed to survive the first wave of the crisis. We have managed to reestablish our operations, to rebalance things. Some better, some worse, but we're here and we keep going. And now going to the next, and as we have seen also from your replies, you feel that this is a long-term crisis that we're facing. We need to start adapting for the next phase. And we need to address the major challenges we have. Some of them, how we can predict how the demand is evolving. All previous models, all previous patterns have been shattered. So we need to find new ways on how to balance the demand that is coming, the changes, and how we can respond to that. The visibility of stocks, of raw materials, of finished goods, of semi-finished, of in-transit stocks has become critical in order to be able to provide a prompt response when needed. We have been forced to reevaluate our portfolio, to reprioritize what are the items that we need, the quantities, also to diversify within the channels the priority of customers, of products, of how also to establish new channels. Most of the companies that have to do with physical goods had to reinvent ways to establish e-commerce within a couple of days. And this has been quite challenging for many of them across sectors. And we also have come to deal with a new reality of managing risks, not only in terms of learning about COVID and informing our people, but also on getting the proper equipment in place all the time. In this view, it's been critical to consider the use of technology. We need to think how better to incorporate the health and safety requirements in our processes and tools. We need to find new tools for planning, be more efficient and adaptive. Procurement has been challenged a lot, and we need to start considering how to adapt our procurement practices to new requirements. For manufacturing also, we need to make sure that we have abilities to produce multiple items across different sites and locations. And also in terms of logistics, we must start identifying alliances that can bring us forward for the time to come. And technology will be a key enabler in all these aspects. We need to find in the market or develop, if needed, also applications and automatic systems that can help us get all the information we need at the proper time and view. Traceability is becoming very critical because it's critical to know what is where. So new technologies like blockchain can enforce not only the availability of our goods, but also of our people within our facilities and across the supply chain. Automated processes in order processing, receiving, handling can give us not only better performance, but also direct connectivity with our customers. And also by automating tasks, we can not only increase the efficiency, but also make it more resilient and stable across different types of operation. Not only for physical handling of goods, but also for the transaction with the broader environment. Going in the beyond, in the longer term, it becomes more critical to get a good visibility of the supply chain. Getting insights in time will help us to adapt our strategy and approach. And new technologies like artificial intelligence or machine learning can help us adapt our forecasting strategies and demand sensing practices. New channels will be established with a focus on the omni-channel now. I believe strongly that omni-channel will be a key priority for the years to come, and we need to be part of our strategy and approaches. And the analysis of portfolios will be a continuous exercise because trends will change, market will be changing, we will need to adapt. Resilience will be a key ingredient for all supply chain strategies. Till now, the focus has been on the costs, but now safety, agility, ability to provide shorter lead times or alternatives will be more important to address the risks of the new era. And all this has to be done within a cost-saving view in mind. The new period will be quite challenging in terms of cost, and all the supply chains will need to be flexible. For this, we feel that some new items that will come in play will be, in terms of planning, an open book mentality is needed. We need to collaborate with our supply chain, our client and our suppliers to be able to identify quickly the new trends, the new patterns, and respond to them in a collaborative way. For the procurement also, we see a new model coming where not only the price will be important, but also the viability of the supply chain. We need to make sure that our procurement partnerships are a win-win situation where we have the cost, but we also have the ability to have viable and healthy suppliers and us to be suppliers of our customers in the same way. So to have a resilient supply chain for all the parties involved. And also in the logistics area, we will see more and more the risk assessment being a part of the everyday activities. Till now, the risk was just a part of an SLA, but we feel that it will be more and more important in the years to come, together with the new digital technologies that are there. So we feel that, again, the technology will be the key driver for this change. New technologies that will help us to ensure the safety and predict changes in the health patterns for our employees and the broader environment. Industry 4 applications that will give us full visibility of what's going on in our production lines, in facilities. And also we will see more and more the 3D printing technologies coming into life because it's a safe way to go through the risks of broken chains. We feel that automation will be keep increasing across this, the area of supply chain. Augmented reality will come to life. And digital twins, it's a new trend that is rising rapidly. It will give us the ability to not only monitor our supply chains, but to run scenarios, identify different options, and build alternatives. Of course, for this to be done efficiently, we need to take into account what's happening with our consumers, the broader environment. And here we have seen through EY's Future Consumer Index, a recent survey that has been run, that the COVID crisis has formulated 4 different types of consumers. We have a save and stockpile persona that is around 35% of the populace, which are people that have not been very concerned about the pandemic until now, but they're very worried about the families and the future prospects, and they're very negatively minded about the long-term effects of this. There is a cut deep group, a little less than 30%. They have been very hardly hit by the pandemic. They're very negative about the future prospects, and they have cut down severely on their spending. Then we have the stay calm and carry on group, which is about a quarter. They have not been changing a lot their spending habits. They have not felt directly the impact of this coming to them, but they get worried about what they see around them, in the neighbors, their families. So they have a worry in the back of the mind without affecting a lot their everyday activities. And then the final group is the hibernate and spend, around a tenth of the populace. They're very concerned about the pandemic, but they have the best positioning in how to address in terms of finance, in terms of technological background, in terms of knowledge and understanding. So they remain optimistic about the future, and they spend around different categories and areas trying to position themselves for the future. The survey has shown that these 4 personas that have been formulated within the crisis will be shifting in the middle term period to 5 different types. They get to normal, that will be around 30%. They will go back to their previous way of living and spending without having felt a lot the impact on their daily lives. They will be the cautiously extravagant group, around 25%. They will be highly focused on specific areas of how they will be spending, so they will rearrange the spending and lifestyle patterns. But they will keep on spending, so we have more than 50% right now. We have the stay frugal group, a little more than 20%. They have been already severely hit, and they will be having also difficulties in the years to come, but having deep cuts, and they will have a very pessimistic outlook. The keep cutting will be more than 10% of the populace, which is the group more severely hit and with the less capabilities to change their position and mind view for the years to come. So they will not only cut for this period, but they will keep having a big decrease on their spending. And the pandemic has been a very big hit for them. And the last smaller group will be around 10% of the populace. Call them back with a bang. They're the youngest group that are till now have been affected because they have been just entering the workspace. But when they will go back, their lives will be disrupted, yes, but they will try to get back as much as possible from what was there, and they will try to spend and get back to life, having the most optimistic outlook of the whole group. If we see how we expect these groups to be changing, we see that there is no linear connection, specific group with another one. So this makes the analysis of how the consumer is behaving, how it perceives the future, being very challenging and very important for our strategic outlook and decisions to come. Thanos, would you like to comment further on that?
Yes, I would like also that what is important, this Future Consumer Index identified the new personas for both the now and next phases. And as Vasilis has mentioned, and we are doing that throughout the webcast, is the beyond for us is very important. And I'm cherry picking a very good question that I can see and just received from our participants. How relevant are these four and then the 5 personas that EY Future Consumer Now Index with the Romanian behaviors? And I'm not aware of any Romanian statistics at the moment. However, what I can be sure of is that human behavior within the pandemic is pretty much similar to many markets, and this save and stockpile type, stay calm and carry on type, the cut deep type, and the hibernate and spend type, that they're going to move to the next phase to these 5 personas are pretty much similar, not only to mature markets, but to all markets throughout the Central and Eastern European. And as we see that personas are changing and new consumer behaviors change, and we propose that we need to reimagine businesses through a, as we call it, purposeful lens. And this may be heard a bit theoretically, but we need to reframe and seize new growth opportunities. We need to redefine the purpose. We need to reimagine relationships with clients and suppliers. We need to transform virtual working, not in a sense within the pandemic, but remote working is here to stay. Reinvent business solutions, explore different go-to-market channels, and definitely being able to provide digital experience. And yes, we have seen the statistics on the use of Teams or on the use of Zooms. For instance, the daily active user count increased by 340%, and the monthly active users by 160%. Amazing numbers. Indescart shoppers went on strike demanding hazardous pay and protective equipment for workers. We have seen automotive manufacturers to produce face shields or other hygiene materials. How easy, of course, is this to happen? It's not easy, but we need to rethink. We need to rethink, taking into account all of the big megatrends. There are many. We have to see environment differently. We have to see responsible relationships. We have to see the purpose, how connected we are as a corporate. We have to increase creativity within our premises, independently if this premise is a retail store or a fulfillment center or just a warehouse facility or a production facility. We need to be we need to see solidarity once again, because the society has shown solidarity independently of the market. And that's why we say, because at the end, all of these theories have to go and have some practical impact. We say apply the 5 C's. And these 5 C's stand for clean. Public employee health is first. Connectivity. We have to accelerate digital transformation, and both Christy and Vasilis have already mentioned about that. We have to see the community and reimagine the relationships as corporates with communities. We have to be create new products, new services, innovate towards more sustainable and flexible and profitable business. We have to be conscientious to increase responsibility, to balance fiscal, operational, and organizational decision making. And here comes, and as I previously mentioned, that we as EY, we say the new world, which is a linear supply chain, and the new world, which is the supply chain of the future, and how does this supply chain of the future looks like. And traditional companies, independently of the size, big, small, medium, have been selling products and services through a linear supply chain model, where corporates were owning a dedicated part of the value chain using on-premises IT and IS systems and competing with their competitors. We as EY supply chain global team, we call it the old world. The value creation was within the entities. The major supply chain processes are kept within the entities, and all of them have on-premise IT IS systems. We say that this model does not fit the purpose, and pandemic has shown us and brought the future now. It brought future back. So we need either to create or to participate at complex ecosystems requiring a fundamental reinvention of our supply chain and operation. And as I previously mentioned, we call it supply chain of the future, of the new world. And imagine that in the middle, we have the brand owner, and yes, this brand owner can have a contract manufacturers or logistics contractors, and this is typical. However, we see new players coming into this ecosystem, like supporting in the engineering collaboration and product life cycle management in the cloud with a co-creation logic. And instead of competing, instead of having competitors, we have co-competitors that try to synergize with us and lowering the cost and trying to be collaborative. These brand owners need to be connected with connectors, which are platform-based business logic models that they can help us out sense the far-end customer, the far-end consumer, not just our customer. And of course, we see players. EY is one of them, that they provide supply chain as a service in various processes in supply chain. For instance, planning, supplier management, risk management. So this is the new world. It's an ecosystem that works on a cloud-enabled platforms, and these digital ecosystems do not work linearly. They are shaping market networks and enable hybrid forms of cooperation and competition. Ecosystems create and serve communities and harness their creativity and intelligence. Entities may play multiple roles in the ecosystem. So this is how we fantasize, and it's not a theoretical, it's a very practical supply chain of the future. And I would like to pass the floor to Mircea.
Thank you, Thanos, for this. So I would propose everybody now let's move a bit on to some very concrete things that you can do going forward. Because we've set the stage, we've set the tools you have, the environment and everything else. But I believe it's now, let's spend a few minutes on how to actually do something about it. And what would be the first and the simplest step in doing something about it would be an exercise in introspection. And what do I mean by that? Is set up scenarios for your current environment, for you going forward, according to the main 4 pillars that impact your business in general, not only on supply chain. So first of all, first one of them would be on planning. assessing what would happen, how would your business be doing should you have issues in supply, should you have issues in demand, should you have issues with raw materials, how well prepared are you in tackling those? Then moving over to the next part, which is buying stuff. How do you treat your suppliers in terms of diversity? Do you also look at tier 1, 2, 3 suppliers and what the impact of a crisis, not necessarily on what's going on right now, what would be the impact on those? Moving on, building, making stuff. What is the agility on the production floor? What is the perceived efficiency of outputs? How transparent are you towards your both suppliers and also customers from the production capabilities point of view? While the last part is actually moving product from where you produce it to warehouses, to the customers, taking into consideration the total cost to serve your customers, whatever else is linked to actually moving product. So you should be building scenarios while taking into consideration all the tiny little gritty things that can be impacted by a crisis in general. Again, not trying to be specific on this one. And by running these scenarios, we have examples of in three different areas, which we have done not only now in the past months, but over the last years as well. And an interesting one is an example from technology. And we did a test of a attacker, of a hacker, doing suspicious queries on a database server on one of our clients. Well, everything went well. They identified the threat. They stopped the attacker. However, what they noticed was that they didn't have any logs. So they couldn't reconstruct the channel through which the attack went, nor other previous attacks that might have been successful or failed because they didn't have the logs at their disposal. So that's an interesting thing for which they ran a scenario, found out some vulnerabilities. Process-wise, in another exercise we did, was the apparent difficulty of the stakeholders of that company to assess an event or an incident. Because obviously, from the severity rating, that in turn would generate different types of responses. So this company has lost a significant amount of time and lost a bit of their agility while trying to decide, well, how impactful this is. Should we should we rate this as an event and go on, or an incident and take some very, very strict measures going on? Thirdly, and the last example I have here, is an exercise for which we did a few years ago, I believe, on a producer, on a manufacturer that tested a scenario in which a natural disaster, which can be compared to what's happening currently, impacted a few of them manufacturing plants. And we noticed that although they had a plan going forward, the staff treated the same scenario differently in plants which actually did the same thing. So it was a major problem of coordination and who should take action, although the manufacturing plants should have been on the same scenario and should have responded similarly. And with this, I would move to the next slide, which actually draws the conclusions on what this outputs of scenarios would be used for and useful going forward. And obviously, should be everything should encompass a vulnerability analysis. You should be looking for and identify most of the vulnerabilities in the supply chain, when you should plan, buy, make, or move, and assess those according to the impact and criticality going forward. Then you should be observing what the gaps are. And you should do that by leveraging the vulnerability outputs, benchmark yourself against whatever your competitors are doing, whatever the leading practices are, and what you notice as a trend, both industry-wide and outside the industry you are part of. Thirdly, you might have a lot of things to solve, and things which are all of them critical, but all of them should be placed on a roadmap, because you cannot solve all the issues at the same time while also being economically efficient, because some of the things have a low probability of happening, although the impact is high, and thus you might lower the prioritization of those compared to some things which are medium in impact, however, with a very high probability of happening. So that would end actually in a business case, which would encompass a lot the four main aspects, from the type of initiative, from the stakeholders going forward, and that are implicated, are involved in this. Also, what the technology is that you can put forward to safeguard in this aspect, and you need to build on. And also, last, the delivery on how you are going to tackle those risks and be resilient to scenarios going forward. So that's about it. I know we're close on time. However, I'd like to ask you for the last poll question of the day, which I hope we have ready. And the last question is, what do you expect to be the driving force with the new supply chain models in the future? And number one would be digital technology. Secondly, the enhanced collaboration practices. Third option is state regulation and guidelines. Fourth would be shared economy models. While fifth is the one you're all observing right now, it's the COVID crisis and its aftermath, which can be a burning platform to evolve and to build more resiliency in the supply chain. And while you fill in the poll question, I would take a bit of time to introduce our guest, and that would be Dragos from Design Thinking Society. And why we thought it would be very interesting to have him part of our conversation is because, as you know, extraordinary times require not just optimizing processes, approaches, and the way we do things, but in a lot of cases, it is required, it is mandatory to do a full rethinking of the processes, and particularly in the supply chain and customer area. And for that, what we typically do is employ design thinking methodology. And one of the most important design thinking players in our market is DTS, with whom we have actually teamed up multiple times for many of our clients, and whose CEO, as I said, Dragos, we have the pleasure to host today. And let me pass the word to you, Dragos, until we have the results to the poll, and then that would be in the closing stages.
Thank you, Mircea. I think we have the results, right? Do you want to go over them, or should I?
Yeah, if you'd like to, please.
All right. So the driving force to the new supply chain models, based on your responses, seems to be digital technology. Yeah. So that is the respondents. That is what, half of the respondents. Those who responded to the question, and also then a quarter of you enhanced collaboration practices. and then fewer on COVID crisis is the next one, and then shared economy models. And there's about 60% of you who haven't responded. All right, so if I will actually link my presentation to these results, because actually they drive very well into the points that I wanted to make. So maybe we can go to the next slide, please. Or actually, can I do that? All right. As Mircea said, design thinking is a set of methods, a discipline that helps you solve in a creative way, in a, let's say, reimagined way, complex and wicked problems. Problems that cannot be solved easily, that you do not have a obvious answer, and cannot be solved by 2 or 3 experts. They require wide collaboration, and I can talk more. I can talk a lot about design thinking, but what I want to talk about today is okay. So, what are some of the areas that design thinking can help you, and that link basically to the supply chain challenges that you have, or you could have in the future. Reimagining, restructuring, reshaping, and creating ecosystems. Those were some of the things that were mentioned here. Also, quick agility and response to the market, and also the what was in the previous in the results, enhanced collaboration. Okay, so creating ecosystems require enhanced collaboration. Now, one of the things, and there's many methods of design thinking, but one that I'm going to talk about today is focused on how can you create a wide collaboration across different structures in a very focused and quick way. And the focus here is on speed. Yeah? So collaboration across structures in a speedy way. And this is based on about 30 years of practice, and we did this for a number of our clients that are mentioned there. Basically, you take many people, 30 to 100 people from, let's say, 5 companies or from 5 departments in the same company, and you, through a guided process across 3 or 4 days, they come up with action plans, new ideas, new ways of doing things, action plans that are ready to implement, and most of all, they are bought in by all these participants. So if you want to create a new supply chain ecosystem, it's not enough to talk about, to collaborate with the legal department and operations department and so on in your company, but you may want to consider bringing in other companies, bringing your lower tiers suppliers. You may bring in even consumers or future consumers for that matter, since we're talking about the beyond. Couple examples of projects we did, one of them with EY earlier this year, in which we brought 3 different companies from the same group that were looking for both optimization as well as economies of scales, but also strategic alignment on the future. So, and that was for a couple of days, about 35 people who actually at the end of it were able to come up with the priority initiatives that would basically focus them on the same direction. And they were from 3 different companies, 3 CEOs with their senior management teams. We also did something else, something similar last year on another group, a banking group that had needed to link the leasing and banking businesses, and there were disconnections between them, and they needed to create an ecosystem in which they could work on the same strategy, share resources, and optimize, get the economies of scales between their customers. So these are just a couple examples and how the design methodologies can help companies to basically adapt at speed. And the speed here, I mean, you work for 3 days with selected number of people, and you arrive to results that you would otherwise that it would otherwise take maybe 6 months, to try to align or coordinate between, like, I don't know, 5 companies in your supply chain. So instead of doing the traditional way of aligning them in, through emails and meetings and all that, you can do a workshop where you bring them all together and you design your ecosystem there. Thank you, and I'm hoping that EY and we can continue to do this for the future.
Thank you very much, Dragoș. Thank you very much to all of you, to the audience, but also to my fellow colleagues. More than happy to answer any kind of questions you've got. You can go on our website www.ey.com/rod to find out any information you'd like to find out about the advisory business, about tax assurance, as well as legal and transaction advisory. Our contacts are also on the website. I'm more than happy to engage in a future conversation with you about the supply chain topics and any kind of process optimization or design thinking. Thank you so much. Yes.
Christine, before ending, I would like to cherry pick of one question. Do we have, let's say, 30 seconds to
Absolutely. That's
a very important, very nice question to be totally honest. How EY is engaged with supply chain? And I would like to mention that EY supply chain global team consists of more than 4,000 professionals worldwide. We have been named, awarded from many accredited institutions as the leading supply chain operations practice in a series of areas, important areas such as digital planning, smart factory, digital logistics and fulfillment. So we are not new in the business, and Romania is a strong market with many supply chain challenges. For instance, third party and transport and freight forwarders are afraid to see that companies now, during the pandemic, ask for immediate reductions of tariffs. Manufacturers are afraid that the large fixed costs will not be able to be absorbed while orders drop for many different reasons. Consumers' products, especially in apparel, cosmetics, have been hit. HoReCa business have been hit enormously, losing a vast of their business and going forward with a problematic summer. The revenues are at stake for many of them. So we are here to support these companies throughout the value chain and the supply chain. And once again, we would like to thank you for calling us and inviting us this morning.
Thank you, Thomas. And I think if we're anyway overboard, I'll answer one more question, which is around why is the supply chain so important right now for the Romanian market, and why are we choosing as UI to focus a bit more, right? And I think one of the interesting perspectives that I've got right now, and I was discussing with my fellow colleagues as well, is that the supply chain in general, if I look at the consumer products as well as the retail, right, has changed fundamentally over the last month, and it was bound to change anyway in the coming years. And the reason is that while we were entering, or we entered about 10-15 years ago on an almost virgin market, right, whereby most of the consumer product production facilities and retailers have expanded continuously on the market, right? So the market was absorbing quite fast a lot of the stores, a lot of the production facilities, a lot of white goods or any other materials, right, that were produced in Romania. I would say that it was expected for this capacity to reach more or less a plateau. And from this perspective, the Romanian market in particular was bound to also focus on the cost optimization, not just the growth. And from that perspective, we as UI have a long history of optimizing businesses, optimizing processes. And we're more than happy to share this experience across a number of industries, particularly when it comes to those, right, the manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, mobility, consumer products, and retail. So that's why we're now much more present when it comes to the supply chain topics. Thank you so much for being with us. We're already 7 minutes late. appreciate. I hope you found the session interesting, and we hope to see you at our next webinars. Have a great day, everyone. All the best. Bye bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers.